تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So we had the last section left on the chapter where we were discussing regarding the mercy or the pardoning and the forgiving of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last thing we had looked at was the ayah وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَنْ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So moving on from that then, the next ayah today, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That to Allah belongs all the might and honor and glory, and to His Messenger and to the believers. To Allah belongs all the might and power and glory, and to His Messenger and to the believers. هذه الآية نزلت في مقابلة قول المنافقين لئن رجعنا إلى المدينة ليخرجن الأعز منها الأذل يريدون أنهم الأعز وأن رسول الله والمؤمنين الأذلون. So this ayah was revealed in the context of the statement of the munafiqun, where Allah mentioned that they were saying, if we return back to Medina, then the honorable ones will expel the lowly ones. And what the munafiqun meant was that they, the munafiqun, are the honorable ones, and that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the believers, they are the degraded ones. The munafiqun, they meant that they themselves are the honorable ones, and that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the believers, they are the degraded ones, the lowly ones. So Allah says that they were claiming, لَإِن رَجَعْنَا إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ لَا يُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلِ. That the honorable ones, they will expel the lowly ones. And they were referring to the messenger and the believers, they are the lowly ones who will be expelled. So Allah revealed, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That rather it is Allah to whom all of the glory and might and power belongs to, and to His Messenger and to the believers. So Allah rebuked the munafiqun for their claims. Allah rebuked the munafiqun who were claiming that they are honorable and the Messenger and the believers are nothing. Allah rebuked them that rather Allah and His Messenger and the believers, they are the ones of honor. They are the ones of honor and superiority over the munafiqun and the kuffar. فَبَيَّنَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنَّهُ لَا عِزَّةَ لَهُمْ. So Allah clarified that they, the munafiqun, have no izzah. They have no honor and glory. فَضْلًا عَنْ أَنْ يَكُونُوا هُمْ الْعِزُّونَ. Let alone that they think they are going to be the honorable and the high ones. وَأَنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. and that in fact the reality is the izzah, that might and power and glory and honor, that is for Allah and His Messenger and the believers. ومقتضى قول المنافقين أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم والمؤمنين هم الذين يخرجون المنافقين لأنهم أهل العزة والمنافقين أهل الذلة، ولهذا كانوا يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم وذلك لذلهم وهلعهم، وكانوا إذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا خوفا وجبنا، وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون، وهذا غاية الذل. So the reality is the opposite of what the munafiqun were claiming. The reality is that the izzah that is for the messenger and the believers, and they are the ones who are going to expel the munafiqun. Not that the munafiqun are going to have power and authority over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The munafiqun are the lowly ones, and that's why it is mentioned about them in the Quran. Allah tells us that when they used to meet the believers, the munafiqun, when they used to come across the believers, they would say, Amanna, that we believe too. We believe. But yet, when they used to separate and go away by themselves, then they would say to their people, they would say to the misguided ones, to the kuffar, that actually we are with you. Inna ma'akum. We were only mocking them. Innama nahnu mustahzi'un. We were only mocking them. We are actually with you. This was their state, and that shows the degradation they were upon, the lowly state of their hypocrisy that they were upon. That when they meet the believers, we are with you. But then when they go away, they say, no, we are with you. We were only mocking them. أَمَّا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. But as for the believers, فَكَانُوا أَعِزَّاءَ بِدِينِهِمْ. The believers were always honorable with their religion. قال الله عنهم في مجادلة أو في مجادلة أهل الكتاب. Allah said regarding the believers in their dispute with the people of the book, or their debate with the people of the book, فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَقُولُوا اشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. That if they turn away from you, then say, testify that indeed we are Muslims. With honor, فَيُعْلِنُونَهَا صَرِيحَةً. They make that known, open and apparent and clear that they are upon Islam. فَقُولُوا اشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. لا يخافون في الله لومة لائم. They do not fear the blame of the ones who blame them. They do not fear the blame of the people. They are clear and open with their statement, we are indeed Muslims. Nothing to hide from, nothing to fear, and not fearing the blame of the ones who will put blame onto them. ففي هذه الآية الكريمة إثبات العزة لله سبحانه وتعالى. So this ayah, the point of it is, and the reason why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned it here, is because it affirms the izzah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that honor and glory and might and power that is for Allah. وذكر أهل العلم أن العزة تنقسم إلى ثلاثة أقسام. And the people of knowledge, the scholars, they have mentioned that Al-Izzah is of three categories. Al-Izzah is of three types. Firstly, Izzatul Qadr. معناه أن الله تعالى ذو قدر عزيز يعني لا نظير له. The first one is regarding the rank and the position and the status in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The izzah of Allah, meaning the rank, the station of Allah, that there is no comparable to Allah. There is no equal to Allah. There is no one, nothing that is resemblant or comparable to Allah in any way. That is one of the meanings of Allah having the izzah over and above all others, having that power and honor over and above all else. There is no one else comparable or resemblant to Him. That is one type of the meaning of izzah. The second type, izzatul qahr. وهي عزة الغلبة يعني أنه غالب كل شيء قاهر كل شيء. The second type is in regards to Allah's might and power and control over all things. The izzah of Allah in terms of Allah having the power and might over all things and control over all things and overwhelms all things. So He is the one غالب على كل شيء قاهر كل شيء. He is the one who is above everything and controls everything and has power and might over everything. The third type, عزة الامتناع. وهي أن الله تعالى يمتنع أن يناله سوء أو نقص، فهو مأخوذ من القوة والصلابة، ومنه قولهم أرض عزاز يعني قوية شديدة. The third meaning is the izzah, that honor, might, glory, power, that prevents any type of deficiency being associated to Allah. Allah, His izzah is such that no deficiency or shortcoming can ever be attributed to Him. That is the third type, izzatul imtina'. No evil, no deficiency, no shortcoming can ever be attributed to Him. And in the Arabic language as well, they use this type of phrase regarding the ground, indicating that the ground is strong and severe, strong and tough, and that nothing can harm it or penetrate it. هذه معاني العزة التي أثبتها الله تعالى لنفسه، وهي تدل على كمال قهره وسلطانه، وعلى كمال صفاته، وعلى تمام تنزهه عن النقص. These meanings of al-izzah, all three of those meanings of al-izzah, they are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed for Himself. Those are meanings of al-izzah that are affirmed to Allah within the Quran and the Sunnah. And it indicates the perfect and complete might and power of Allah and the perfection of the attributes of Allah and the complete perfection of Allah, such that no deficiency or shortcoming overcomes Him. وَقَوْلُهُ, and in the ayah, Allah had mentioned that the izzah is for Allah and for the messenger and for the believers. So in regards to that, قوله ولرسوله وللمؤمنين يعني أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم له عزة وللمؤمنين أيضا عزة وغلبة. So this highlights that the messenger has izzah, has a degree of power and ability and rank and station and glory and might over the others. And the believers likewise have a level of ability and power and glory and might over the disbelievers. Of course, as we know and we've studied many a time now, and we went through the principles at the beginning, affirming this to the messenger and to the believers, the izzah does not in any way necessitate any comparison to that and the izzah of Allah. And there is no resemblance between when we talk about the izzah of Allah, the Almighty and Powerful, compared to the izzah that we have in creation. But Allah affirms that they have a level of izzah, the messenger and the believers. In fact, the Shaykh al-Uthaymeen mentions here, لكن يجب أن نعلم أن العزة التي أثبتها الله لرسوله وللمؤمنين ليست كعزة الله. That the izzah that Allah has affirmed for the messenger and for the believers, it is not comparable or similar or like the izzah of Allah. فإن عزة الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام والمؤمنين قد يشوبها ذلة. The izzah that creation have, that the messenger and the believers have, it is not an absolute form of izzah. The absolute izzah is for Allah. As for the believers, they have izzah, but there could come a time where some affair occurs and the kuffar, they get an upper hand at some point, or some issue occurs where they are able to demonstrate their power over the believers. And there were incidents that occurred. There were incidents that occurred in the seerah when the kuffar, they would harm the believers and they would harm the messenger. So the believers, the messenger and the believers had izzah, but it's not an absolute izzah. There may well be times when the kuffar, they got the upper hand here or there on certain issues. لقوله تعالى ولقد نصركم الله ببدر وأنتم أذلة. An example in Surah Al-Imran, when Allah mentioned that He aided you at Badr, He aided you at Badr, and at that time you were adillah. Because in the battle of Badr, we know the history at that time, the believers, their numbers, many more weapons. The Muslims barely had any armor. They barely had any weapons in the battle of Badr compared to what the kuffar had. So Allah mentioned, Allah aided you in Badr when you were at that time adillah, compared to the mushrikun, the kuffar, the numbers they had, the amount of weapons they came with. But yet Allah aided you at that time. وَقَدْ يَغْلِبُونَ أَحْيَانًا لِحِكْمَةٍ يُرِيدُهَا اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And sometimes it could be the case that Allah, for a wisdom that Allah is aware of, He may allow the kuffar some level of overcoming the believers. Some level of it occasionally may occur. And that is from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the decree of Allah, that He allows something to occur of that nature, and Allah is all aware and all wise in everything He does. And an example of that, of course, is the battle of Uhud. In the battle of Uhud, it was not, you cannot say that it was a complete and absolute form of izzah for the believers in the battle of Uhud. Everybody knows the history and what occurred, and how the kuffar, they came back around again, and Khalid ibn Walid, and then the believers, many of them were martyred. So it was not a complete whitewash of the kuffar in the battle of Uhud. There was some events that occurred and some of the believers were harmed. Even the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he was struck on the face and his tooth was broken and he fell down into a pit. So as Shaykh al-Uthaymeen mentions, في أحد لم يحصل لهم تمام العزة. In Uhud, they did not have the complete and perfection of Izzah. لأنهم غلبوا في النهاية لحكم عظيمة. But they were victorious overall, but those incidents did occur. وكذلك في حنين ولوا مدبرين ولم يبق مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من 12,000 إلا نحو 100 رجل. And then in the battle of Hunayn and the events that happened in Hunayn, when many of them they turned around and fled and there were only approximately 100 men left with the messenger. هذا أيضا فقد للعزة لكنه مؤقت. So there are some events in the seerah where the kuffar, they may have got temporarily an upper hand on the believers in certain incidents here and there. So the Shaykh says those incidents, mu'aqqat, they were only temporary little occasions here and there where the munafiqun, where the kuffar, they got a slight upper hand on the believers. أما عزة الله عز وجل فلا يمكن أبدا أن تفقد. As for the izzah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is not possible whatsoever that it could ever be lost at any moment, even temporarily. وبهذا عرفنا أن العزة التي أثبتها الله لرسوله وللمؤمنين ليست كالعزة التي أثبتها لنفسه. So this highlights to us then with a few examples there that the izzah that is being affirmed for the messenger and for the believers, it is not like the izzah that is being affirmed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no comparison and resemblance. وهذا أيضا يمكن أن يؤخذ من القاعدة العامة. And from this you can implement and apply the general rule anyway, وهي, which is أنه لا يلزم من اتفاق الاسمين أن يتماثل المسميان ولا من اتفاق الصفتين أن يتماثل الموصوفان. This we talked about right at the beginning of Al-Wasitiyyah. When we started right at the beginning and we were going through the principles, the qawaid regarding al-asma'u wa-sifat, we touched upon this. The Shaykh says the principle here, you remember, is that just because two things have the same name, it does not mean that those two things are actually the same thing. Two different things may have the same name to them, but their realities may not match up. And you remember that example about leg. A leg, if you say the word leg, the leg of an elephant and the leg of an ant, both of them is the word leg. But is the reality of the leg of an elephant comparable to the reality of the leg of an ant? They are completely different in their realities, yet the word is leg for both of them. So the Shaykh said, remember that principle. The name may be the same. We're saying Allah has izzah. We're saying the messenger and the believers have izzah. The same name. But the reality of that may not be, and it does not necessitate that it is the same. And also, you may have two attributes that are the same, and yet their realities may be different. Two attributes that are the same word, the same attribute, but their realities are in different ways. Again, you could give those kind of same examples. You could say that an elephant has the attribute of strength. No doubt, an elephant has the attribute of strength. Powerful animal. Yet, you could use the same description and say these some of these small beetles, they are able to carry double or triple their own body weight. They mention these things in the biology and those kinds of affairs. You can get some of these insects, they can carry double their own body weight, triple their own body weight, quadruple their own body weight. An elephant, could it carry 4 elephants on top of itself? So in that way, maybe even this beetle is more powerful than the elephant. It can carry triple, quadruple its own body weight on top of itself. An elephant couldn't carry another 3 elephants on top, it'd be squashed. So the same word is being used, an elephant is powerful. And yet you could argue this little beetle is powerful because of the way its strength is. The attribute being mentioned is the same. And yet the realities may be different. If you look at it in an absolute sense, you would say, no, the beetle has no power, squash it, it's dead. Yet the elephant, what's a human going to do to an elephant? In that regard, you would say the elephant is completely powerful compared to this tiny beetle. So the words may be the same that are being used, the attributes may be the same that are being used, but that does not necessitate that their realities are identical. Their realities may be different. And so the Shaykh says, remember that principle anytime we ever mention some name or some attribute that is for Allah, and we say that the humans have this or creation has that, then it does not necessitate by using the same name or attribute that the realities between them are the same. They are not. Then the 4th ayah, وَفِي الْعِزَّةِ أَيْضًا وَهِيَ قَوْلُهُ عَنْ إِبْلِيسَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. Here it is as though the shaitan is taking a type of oath. بِعِزَّتِكَ, by your might and glory, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ, that I am going to try to mislead them all. الباء هنا للقسم لكنه اختار القسم بالعزة دون غيرها من الصفات لأن المقام مقام مغالبة، فكأنه قال بعزتك التي تغلب بها من سواك لأغوين هؤلاء وأسيطر عليهم، يعني بني آدم حتى يخرجوا من الرشد إلى الغي. The reason why Iblis here mentioned, by your might and honor and glory I will mislead them. It's as though the reason being this circumstance and this context of when Iblis is saying this, the context of it is that Allah, His Izzah, overwhelms and overrides the creation. So it is as though Iblis is saying, by your Izzah, that I will mislead them and I will overcome them. فَبِعِزَّتِكَ الَّتِي تَغْلِبُ بِهَا مَنْ سِوَاكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَأُسَيْطِرُ عَلَيْهِمْ. So by your Izzah, the Izzah which has power over everything, by your Izzah, I will overcome or mislead them and misguide them and whisper to them and take them away from the straight path. But there is an exception to that. يُسْتَثْنَى مِنْ هَذَا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ الْمُخْلَصُونَ. The sincere servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are exempt from that. The sincere servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are exempt from that. يستثنى من هذا عباد الله المخلصون فإن إبليس لا يستطيع أن يغويهم. The sincere servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Iblis is not able to take them away. Iblis is not able to mislead them and misguide them. كما قال تعالى, just as Allah said, إن عبادي ليس لك عليهم سلطان, that indeed my servants, you do not have any power, ability, control over them. ففي هاتين الآيتين إثبات العزة لله. So in those two ayat, there is an affirmation of the izzah to Allah. Also, Shaykh al-Uthaymeen mentions a benefit here, that of course the ayat, they give you the affirmation of the attributes of Allah. But on top of that, it affirms to us that Shaitan, Iblis himself affirms the attributes of Allah, al-Izzah. في الآية الثانية إثبات أن الشيطان يقر بصفات الله. Shaitan himself acknowledges the attributes of Allah. Shaitan himself, بِعِزَّتِكَ, acknowledges the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فكيف نجد من بني آدم من ينكر صفات الله أو بعضها أيكون الشيطان أعلم بالله وأعقل مسلكا من هؤلاء النفاة. The Shaykh says Iblis himself acknowledges the attributes of Allah. So how can it be that there are those from the humans, Bani Adam, who reject the attributes of Allah or reject some of the attributes of Allah? The groups of innovation, there are some who reject all of the attributes of Allah, some who reject the names and the attributes of Allah, some who reject some of the names, some who reject some of the attributes. The Shaykh says these people who reject from mankind, is Iblis more knowledgeable than them about Allah? And Iblis is more intelligent in his pathway that he treads upon than these individuals who completely negate the attributes of Allah. Iblis has tread upon a pathway where he acknowledges the attributes of Allah, and yet these individuals, they come along rejecting and negating the attributes of Allah. The Shaykh says it is a strange affair that Iblis is more knowledgeable than you in regards to this, into the names and attributes of Allah. So, those were the sections regarding pardoning, forgiving, the section regarding al-Izzah. But one thing that is important when it comes to learning about the names and attributes of Allah is that you don't just learn the names and attributes like it's mathematics or something. You learn this is an attribute, this is a name, this is an attribute, and like you're making a list and that's it. That isn't the purpose. On top of that, it is important to understand what are the fruits of these names and attributes. Now it is important to understand, what do you benefit? What do you benefit if you know about these attributes of Allah? Of al-afu, of pardoning, and al-izzah. What benefit does a person get knowing that Allah has these names and attributes? It's important, the fruits, and the Shaykh, he mentions them now. He says, مَا نَسْتَفِيدُهُ مِنَ النَّاحِيَةِ الْمَسْلَكِيَّةِ. That for us now, what are the fruits of knowing this knowledge? What are the fruits of knowing it? فِي الْعَافُ وَالصَّفْحِ. In terms of the pardoning, when we learnt all about the pardoning and the ayat of pardoning, and you know in Ramadan all the time you make the dua, Allahumma innaka afuwan tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. In fact, it reminds me, as they say, ash-shay'u bi-shay' yudhkar. It reminds me of a story of some people. They were going on holiday, on a flight to Morocco. And one of our brothers who we know was on the flight as well. And the flight started getting severe turbulence. Shaking around the aeroplane, up and down, shaking around like it's going to crash. Severe turbulence. And people were screaming and shouting and grabbing things, and it was becoming very rough, the flight. So one of the brothers who we know was on the flight, and he said, next to me there were these young people, clean shaven, wearing all these Western kind of clothes. They were Muslim, but you could tell they were not practicing or anything, the way they were talking, what they were doing on the whole flight. But when that happened, all of a sudden when this happened, the brother said to us, they were sat there, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. They started suddenly, mashallah, like the most knowledgeable people on the plane. And before that, they were like, what they were doing and how they were talking and swearing and other things, Allah alam, what they were behaving like. But as soon as that occurred, all of a sudden, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. And the brother was narrating to us, this is what they started doing. He said, I found it amusing. That how they were behaving before and how now they behave when they see this calamity maybe about to occur. So in Ramadan, when you make the dua, and it is mentioned in the hadith of Aisha also, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. So the Shaykh says, in regards to knowing that, what do you benefit knowing that Allah pardons? Huwa annana idha alimna anna Allah afuun. That if we know now that Allah is al-afu, wa annahu qadirun, and that He is the one all capable and pardoning, أوجب لنا ذلك أن نسأله العفو دائما. It then necessitates from us that we make dua asking Allah for the afu, that we regularly make dua asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to pardon us and to forgive us. وأن نرجو منه العفو عما حصل منا من التقصير في الواجب, and that we hope for, we make dua and we hope for that pardon from Allah from the shortcomings that we have had in our obligations. This is something that you mentally now remember. You have shortcomings, then you make dua asking Allah for pardon on those affairs that occurred, and you fell short in obligations, wajibat. So you calling of Allah on the shortcomings in those wajibat. Amma al-izzah, as for knowing that Allah has al-izzah, and those types of al-izzah we mentioned. إِذَا عَلِمْنَا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ. If we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Aziz, al-Aziz, the one with izzah, the power, the might, the glory, the majesty. فإننا لا يمكن أن نفعل فعلا نحارب الله فيه. Then it should not be possible for us that we go down the path of committing actions that are at war against Allah. Doing actions in disobedience to Allah, sinning against Allah, treading upon a path in which we are in war against Allah, then a person who truly recognizes and realizes Allah is Aziz, then you would not dare to do things in disobedience to Allah and in war against Allah. That's why the scholars, they always mentioned the ayah regarding who are the people that truly fear Allah. إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. Everybody, every believer, every Muslim, you ask them, do you fear Allah? They're going to say, yes. Everybody will say, I fear Allah. Of course we fear Allah. Everybody will say that. But who are the ones who have that real high level of fear of Allah? Allah tells us in the Quran, إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. The scholars, Ahlul Ilm, the people of knowledge. Why? Why are they the ones who truly have that real fear of Allah? Because they are the ones who know about all of these names and attributes of Allah. They are the ones who have knowledge of all of these names and attributes of Allah. And when you have knowledge of all of these affairs and understanding and comprehension of all the names and attributes of Allah, then you realize that Allah is the oft forgiving, but that Allah is also Shadidul Iqab, severe in punishment. And so you have that fear of Allah more because you recognize who your Lord is more and you have an understanding of your Lord more. And so that is going to bring about a greater level of fear from your Lord for the one who has that level of knowledge. The Shaykh gives some examples and then he says وَيُمْكِنْ أَن نَقُولَ فِيهَا فَائِدَةً مِنَ النَّاحِيَةِ الْمَسْلَكِيَّةِ أيضا, that there is another benefit we can mention, وهي أن الإنسان المؤمن ينبغي له أن يكون عزيزا في دينه. Another benefit from a different angle is that if you know about the izzah of Allah and that Allah said the messenger and the believers have izzah, then you should in your religion try to be aziz. بحيث لا يذل أمام أحد من الناس كائن من كان. That you do not degrade yourself or lower yourself in front of the people. You have honor in your religion. You have honor in your religion and you do not give way in terms of your religion and lower yourself in terms of your religion to anyone. Especially these days now, the way the world is, anybody can believe whatever they want to believe. Anybody can have whatever ideas they want, whatever beliefs they want, whatever philosophy they want, and you're not allowed to speak against anyone because it's discrimination, it's this, it's that, it's prejudice. So why are people ashamed or have any fear of being open about their religion? Be in honor with the religion. أن يكون عزيزا في دينه بحيث لا يضل أمام أحد من الناس كائن من كان إلا على المؤمنين فيكون عزيزا على الكفار ذليلا على المؤمنين. The only people that you lower yourself to and you humble yourself with are the believers. With the believers you have that softness and lower yourself and be gentle and humble, but with respect to your religion. Then you are not going to lower yourself in your religion. You are not going to degrade yourself in your religion. You have honor for the religion and the practicing of Islam. And you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran that this is the chosen religion. Inna ad-deena inda Allahi al-Islam. That indeed the religion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Islam. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. And Allah told us, if anybody seeks a religion other than Islam, then it will not be accepted from him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ اسْتَفَى لَكُمُ الدِّينَ فَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Allah selected for you the religion, so do not die, except that you are upon Islam as believers. And many ayat affirming how the prophets and messengers, they died upon that Tawheed and Islam. So the Shaykh says, one of the other benefits you gain from this, in knowing that Allah is Aziz, has Izzah, is that you be Aziz in your religion. Be upon that honor in your religion and do not be weak in your religion. This does not mean that a person does not have wisdom. Of course, you behave with wisdom in practicing your religion and giving da'wah to the people. It does not mean a person does whatever he wants and he says, I'm being aziz in my religion, and has no wisdom or hikmah in how he behaves with the community or the people. But with wisdom and at the same time, no loss of your religion or lowering yourself from your religion. That brings us to the end of that chapter. And we can briefly maybe look at the next section as well. It says, إثبات. ذكر المؤلف رحمه الله آية في إثبات الاسم لله تعالى وآيات أخرى كثيرة في تنزيه الله تعالى ونفي المثيل عنه. آية إثبات الاسم تبارك اسم رب الخالقين, the best of the creators. And so, when this is mentioned in regards to the name of Allah, تبارك اسم ربك, معناها أن البركة تكون بسم الله. The meaning then is that barakah comes in the name of Allah. That there is barakah in the name of Allah. أي أن اسم الله إذا صاحب شيئا صارت فيه البركة. That if the name of Allah, it accompanies something, then there will be barakah in that affair. If the name of Allah accompanies something, then there is barakah in that affair. And that's why there are some narrations, even though there is a lot of speech regarding the authenticity of them and the chains of narration, there's a lot of detail, but the narrations are often quoted and you'll hear them. كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ فيه ببسم الله فهو أبتر أي ناقص البركة. So there is this narration and there is some speech about its authenticity, but the narration mentions every affair of importance that does not begin with Bismillah, then it is cut off, meaning it is deficient in its barakah. Every affair that does not begin with Bismillah, then it is deficient in barakah. بل إن التسمية تفيد حل الشيء الذي يحرم بدونها حل الشيء الذي يحرم بدونها فإنه إذا سمى الله على الذبيحة صارت حلالا. To the extent the Shaykh says in some circumstances using the name of Allah makes something from haram into halal. And the example is sacrificing. You sacrifice an animal not in the name of Allah, then it's haram. But you sacrifice it in the name of Allah, now it's halal. وَإِذَا لَمْ يُسَمِّي صَارَتْ حَرَامًا وَمَيْتًا. Without that proper sacrificing in the name of Allah, the animal is considered unsacrificed. And you cannot eat it, considered a corpse. وَهُنَاكَ فَرْقٌ بَيْنَ الْحَلَالِ الطَّيِّبِ الطَّاهِرِ وَالْمَيْتَةِ النَّجِسَةِ الْخَبِيثَةِ. And there is clearly a big difference. You could have 2 cows, 2 sheep, both of them exactly the same, but one of them you slaughter them in the name of Allah, one is slaughtered without the name of Allah. Both of them same meat, everything, same age, sheep, all healthy, but this one is now khabith, cannot be eaten, and this one is now pure and good and can be eaten. The difference between the name of Allah in sacrificing them properly. وَإِذَا سَمَّ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى طَهَارَةِ الْحَدَثِ صَحَّتْ وَإِذَا لَمْ يُسَمِّ لَمْ تَصِحْ عَلَى أَحَدِ الْقَوْلَيْنِ. Another example where there's a difference of opinion about it, but when you make wudu, there is an opinion of some scholars, you have to begin with Bismillah. You have to say Bismillah when you make wudu. And some scholars hold the opinion, if you don't do that, your wudu is incorrect. It's an opinion, it's not the Jumhur opinion, but it's an opinion that your wudu is only valid if you say Bismillah at the start of it. It's one opinion, but the Jumhur, they say it's only Sunnah. وَإِذَا سَمَّ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى طَعَامِهِ لَمْ يَأْكُلْ مَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانِ وَإِنْ لَمْ يُسَمِّهِ أَكَلَ مَعَهُ. And when you eat, if you say Bismillah, the shaitan does not eat with you. But if you don't say Bismillah, then the shaitan eats alongside you. And one of the Salaf mentioned, it's a statement of one of the Salaf, in regards to this point, when you say Bismillah upon the food, the shaitan doesn't come upon you, does not eat with you, but when you don't say it, the shaitan eats as well. One of the Salaf, he mentioned that this could even be applicable when it comes to intercourse. When a man has intercourse with his wife, there's a dua you're supposed to read at the beginning. That if a person didn't read that dua, one of the Salaf mentioned, the shaitan participates with you. Shaitan participates with you. It's mentioned in one of the statements of one of the Salaf in regards to this, because there's a dua you're supposed to recite at the beginning, and if a person doesn't do that, doesn't remember anything, then one of the Salaf mentioned the shaitan participates with you. So this is the importance of the remembrance and the dua, or the mentioning of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِذَا سَمَّ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى in fact, the Shaykh mentions it here now. وَإِذَا سَمَّ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى جِمَاعِهِ وَقَالَ اللَّهُمَّ جَنِّبْنَا الشَّيْطَانَ وَجَنِّبِ الشَّيْطَانَ مَا رَزَقْتَنَا ثُمَّ قَدْ قُدِّرَ بَيْنَهُمَا وَلَدٌ لَمْ يَضُرُّهُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَبَدًا. The dua actually mentions, when you look into the explanations of it, the dua that you read, that, oh Allah, separate from us the shaitan, keep the shaitan away from us, and keep the shaitan away from what you bless us with, meaning the offspring that may occur after this intercourse, that you keep the shaitan away from our offspring as well. The scholars, they said the meaning of this dua that you are supposed to read prior to intercourse, Allah keep the shaitan away from us and keep the shaitan away from our future offspring that occurs from this. The scholars, they said one of the meanings of it is that this child, when he grows up, some scholars, these are their explanations in their books of fiqh, etc. They said this child, when he grows up, he will be protected from ever falling into apostasy. Apostasy could occur, people apostate. But the scholars, they said if you make this dua upon your intercourse, prior to your intercourse, then one of the meanings of it, oh Allah, keep the shaitan away from our offspring. Some scholars said perhaps this could be an indication that whatever happens to your child, he will die as a Muslim. That he will not apostate upon this dua that you recite, asking Allah to keep the shaitan away from your offspring. And other scholars, they mentioned other things, that the child will not fall into bid'ah and other affairs because the shaitan will be kept away from him. But no doubt there is a great virtue to this, and it is from the Sunnah to do so. وَإِن لَمْ يَفْعَلْ, and if a person doesn't do that, has the intercourse and does not remember this dua, فَالْوَلَدْ عُرْضَةٌ لِضَرَرِ الشَّيْطَانِ, then that offspring is left exposed to the shaitan influencing or harming that offspring, your child, in the future. So then, when it mentions فَتَبَارَكَ هنا ليست بمعنى تعالى وتعاظم، بل يتعين أن يكون معناها حلت البركة بسم الله، أي أن اسمه سبب للبركة إذا صحب شيئا. So the Shaykh says تبارك, typically it means تعالى and تعاظم. But here he says the meaning that has to be understood is that the name of Allah with it is barakah. That if you mention the name of Allah, then it is a cause, a reasoning, a sabab for the barakah to occur for a person. And as you know, a means can be implemented, and maybe there could be other factors that cause or prevent that mean from occurring. People sometimes they say, okay, in the Sunnah it says if you read this, then this will happen or that will happen. And I read it and it didn't happen. And they'll say in the Sunnah it says if you do this dua, then such and such will be protected from it. But I did the dua and still this happened and that happened. Because these are the means that Allah has given us. This is a means to recite this dua and other duas. But there could be other factors sometimes that prevent that from occurring. You make dua to Allah, but maybe your dua is not answered. And there could be other factors behind that. So the Shaykh says the point is though, in the name of Allah is barakah. And then the end of the ayah mentions Dhil Jalali wal Ikram, which we already mentioned in a previous section. That's where we'll stop on for today then. And we'll start with the ayah, very important ayah in fact. فَاعْبُدْهُ وَاصْطَبِرْ لِعِبَادَتِهِ هَلْ تَعْلَمُ لَهُ سَمِيًّا. That ayah we begin with next time is one of the fundamental ayat in the chapter of names and attributes. That is one of the principles, fundamental ayat when it comes to names and attributes. And we'll start with that one from next time, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.